couple of years ago, I was stuck in one of those over-the-top family reunions. You know, the kind everyone you're related to within a 500-mile radius shows up, and you have to try and remember who's who. I made it out in one piece, but I ended up leaving late, like crazy late. Like when it's so late, the only things on the road are you, a handful of bugs splattering against your windshield, and the ghostly hum of 18-wheelers on the distant freeway. And I still had a solid 2-hour drive ahead of me. Let me tell you, I was completely exhausted. You know when you're so tired you can feel it in your bones? Like your whole body is shutting down, bit by bit. My eyelids were like lead weights. I was yawning so much that my jaw was getting a workout. I needed sleep so badly. So, I started looking for a spot to pull over and catch a power nap. But the thing about this road was, it was lined with these gnarly knotted trees, like something straight out of a Grimm's fairy tale. And it wasn't just a few trees. It was thick, dense woods that seemed to consume everything around it, including light. So finding a decent spot to park was harder than I thought it would be. Finally, after what felt like a never-ending drive through some haunted forest, I decided, what the hell? I'm just gonna pull over here. It was around 11:22. I checked before killing the engine. I reclined my seat, set my alarm for a quick power nap, and within seconds, I was out cold. Suddenly, I jolt awake, heart pounding, to this disturbing scratching sound, like fingernails on a chalkboard. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I glanced at my phone. It was 11:50. The scratching stopped just as suddenly as it started. Rubbing my eyes, I told myself it must have been a raccoon or some other critter. I wasn't about to go and investigate, so I nestled back into my seat, hoping for a few more hours of sleep. But the peace didn't last long. Around 12:40, the same irritating sound roused me from my sleep. This time, though, it felt different. It was longer, more intentional, like whatever was out there was deliberately trying to get my attention. I peered into my rearview mirror, and I could have sworn I saw a shadow darting into the woods. The sight sent chills down my spine. I'm not usually the type to get freaked out, but at that moment, I thought of all those urban legends, the ones about hook-handed killers, crazy escapees, the lot. The thought of ending up as another unsolved mystery was more than enough to get my heart racing. I had to get out of there. I fumbled with the keys, started the engine, and was just about to step on it when I saw something strange. A car parked just up ahead, its driver's door wide open, and there was nobody around. I slowed down a bit, craning my neck to get a better look. The car was empty. I was just about to say screw it and speed off when this guy appeared out of nowhere. He came tearing around the bend, arms flailing. He was yelling stuff like, "Get out! Get out!" That was all the motivation that I needed. I floored it. The engine roared to life, and my car shot down the road, leaving the scene behind in a cloud of dust. My heart was hammering in my chest. The adrenaline was pumping so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear. I had a million questions. Who was that guy? Why was he freaking out? Was he the one scratching my car? And what was he doing out here in the middle of nowhere? But there was one question that stood out amongst the rest. What would have happened if I hadn't woken up and driven away? The rest of the drive was a blur. Every shadow, every unexpected noise sent a fresh wave of fear coursing through me. I was in a constant state of heightened alertness. I kept glancing at my rearview mirror, half expecting to see that dude chasing after me, but it was nothing but the open road. The city lights finally appeared on the horizon, and I could feel the tension slowly leaving my body. It was like I'd been holding my breath for the last hour and I could finally breathe. The comfort of the familiar cityscape was a stark contrast to the creepy, isolated road I'd just escaped from. I made it home, safe and sound, collapsed on my bed. I remember thinking to myself how unreal the whole experience felt, like some kind of twisted nightmare. But the faint scratches on the side of my car the next morning were all too real, a chilling reminder of the previous night's ordeal. The lesson I learned that night, etched deep into my memory, was simple yet profound. Never. And I mean never try to sleep on the side of a deserted road. You never know what kind of weird, creepy, downright terrifying stuff is out there, just waiting for some unsuspecting guy to doze off. So stay safe and keep driving until you find a well-lit rest area or a 24-hour diner. Trust me, it's worth the extra mile. When I was just a little kid, we lived in this somewhat isolated spot in Georgia, a place where the houses were few and far apart, surrounded by acres of woods. The weekends were my favorite, not just because there was no school, but also because my parents let me crash in the living room on those nights. My sister, a light sleeper, couldn't handle the slightest of noise, which gave me the golden ticket to stay up late. Glued to the TV, binging on Nick at night until sleep claimed me on the comfy couch. On one of those nights, something happened that still feels like a nightmare when I think about it. I remember waking up with a jolt, like someone had just shouted my name. My heart was pounding, and I had this strange feeling that something was off. You know that gut feeling when you just know something isn't right? It was exactly like that. Rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I sat up on the couch, greeted by the soft glow of the pale moonlight streaming through the front window. Peering into the night, my heart skipped a beat. Right there, illuminated by the moon, was a figure standing among the trees that lined our property. The sight sent chills down my spine. And to make things even creepier, our usually calm dog, Max, went absolutely wild. Barking, growling, fixated on the exact spot that had caught my eye. It was enough to give me serious goosebumps. Shaking with fear, I raced into my parents' room and urgently described the stranger I had spotted outside. I can still vividly recall my dad's immediate response, springing out of bed with wide, determined eyes. He didn't question or dismiss my account as a mere dream. Instead, he swiftly retrieved an axe hidden behind their closet cabinet, called for Max, and rushed outside. Meanwhile, my mom and I huddled together, gripped by apprehension, anxiously awaiting their return. What felt like hours later, my dad came back in. He was alone, Max trailing behind him, both of them looking a bit puzzled. He said he'd seen no one, no sign of anyone having been in the tree or anywhere else on our property. He told us it was safe to go back to sleep. But his words did little to calm my racing heart. Gathering some courage, I decided to sleep in my own room that night. My sister was already awake, her face pale in the dim light as I shared the scary incident. We huddled in our beds, listening to the faint sound of our dad moving around the house, his footsteps and the occasional clink of his coffee cup, the only sounds breaking the heavy silence. I remember lying there wide awake, my eyes darting to every shadow. The fear kept me on edge, but slowly, sleep started creeping in. But just as I was about to drift off, I spotted a figure outside my window. I could barely see his face in the dim moonlight, but his intentions were clear when he put a finger to his lips, signaling me to be quiet. And then, as quickly as he'd appeared, he was gone, sprinting into the dense woods. I remember the tears, the fear, and the sense of dread that washed over me. It took me what seemed like forever to calm down, to reassure myself that I was safe, that it was over. I eventually drifted off to sleep, but woke up several times, my heart pounding at the smallest of sounds. To this day, that night stays with me, a chilling memory that feels all too real, serving as a constant reminder of the fear I felt and the unknown stranger who watched from the shadows. When I was a kid, I lived in this really weird house. It was tall and skinny, like someone squished a big house to make it fit in a small space. It had 3 floors, an attic, and a basement, like a huge layer cake made of bricks and plaster. The house was full of odd things that didn't make much sense. It had 2 fireplaces that we could actually use, a shower right in the middle of the basement, and a backyard that was so tiny you couldn't walk 5 steps without hitting the fence. The coolest part? An old-timey rope pull dumbwaiter. It was like having my own private elevator from the kitchen to my bedroom. But the house was really old, and it seemed like something was always breaking or needing to be fixed. Eventually, my parents decided it was too expensive to keep up with all the repairs, and we had to move. Getting ready for the move was a lot of work. I packed up most of my things myself, and I started to use the dumbwaiter to send stuff down from my room. My closet was so packed with clothes, they were like one big solid block. While I was emptying it out, I noticed something I'd never seen before, a little door that led to the attic. Being the curious kid I was, I decided to check it out. When I opened the little door and climbed up into the attic, I noticed it wasn't as dark as I thought it would be. Someone had strung up old Christmas lights, and they were still glowing a little. There were tiny cracks and holes in the floor that let in light from the rooms below, and someone had set it up like a little room. There was a plastic cover over the itchy insulation, an old hospital bed covered with sleeping bags and sheets, and an old-school fridge that still worked when I plugged it in. But what really caught my attention was the piles of bones. There were so many bones, all different kinds, piled up in several places around the attic. Some were small, others were big, and they were all super clean and white. It looked like they came from all kinds of different animals. A couple of the piles were black, like they've been burned. The walls near these piles had been written on with the bone char. Most of it was just smeared, but the word sorry showed up again and again. This whole attic exploration got me thinking. I mean, who lived up here before and why? The Christmas lights, the gurney-turned bed, the old fridge, they all hinted at someone's presence in the past. I was just a kid, but I felt like a detective in some creepy mystery novel, unearthing secrets in my own home. I started to look around more, curiosity winning over the creepy atmosphere. The floorboards creaked and groaned under my weight, echoing my own nervousness. I moved closer to the bone piles, my heart pounding. There were all sorts of shapes and sizes, and some even had marks on them. What on earth had happened here? I noticed a dark corner of the attic that was somewhat hidden from view. I found an old wooden chest there, weathered and worn, with a rusty lock hanging open. I tugged it open, half expecting more bones to tumble out. Instead, I found old photographs, yellowed with age. They were of my house, but it looked so different. Brand new, with a proud family standing in front of it. Then I noticed something odd in the pictures. The same figure was in each one, not a part of the family, but always in the background, slightly out of focus, watching. The figure was tall and lean, draped in dark clothing. I couldn't make out the face, but I knew in my gut it was the same person who had stayed in the attic. I suddenly felt like I wasn't alone. The attic, with its soft glow from the Christmas lights, started to feel a lot darker. The temperature seemed to drop, and a chill ran down my spine. I carefully placed the photos back in the chest, closed it, and backed away. Sorry written on the wall looked even more sinister now. I shivered, realizing that the person who'd slept here must have been desperate, alone, and maybe even scared. Scared like me. I clambered down from the attic as fast as I could, shutting the little door behind me with a bang. I left my clothes brick in the closet and ran downstairs, not caring about the noise. I found my parents in the kitchen, sorting through more stuff for the move. When I told them what I found, they went silent, their faces drained of color. I guess they didn't know about the attic's history either. We called the police, who arrived and carefully collected the bones and photographs. They told us they'd look into it. That night, we all slept in the living room, too spooked to be alone. That attic and its secrets haunted me. Even after we moved out, I couldn't help but think about it. Who was the person in the attic? Why were they living there? What happened to them? The answers were as lost as the person themselves, forever entwined with that skinny, quirky house. But I knew one thing for sure: I'd never forget the chilling mystery that was hiding right above my bedroom for all those years.